The projector is not reading for computer. They're just trying to shut it down now. I can start it and see if that helps. So the dash would be on.
Yeah, so I noticed that, but I didn't want to mess with it.
That's all right. I saw it on the screen.
Okay. I was like, should I turn it? Should I not?
No worries.
I'm not going to touch it.
No worries at all.
I noticed that the last time. But she didn't want to be on camera anyways. She was like, we could just turn it off. You could just knock it over. I was like...
For most of them, we're focusing on the screen.
Okay. So if I notice that, I know.
You can, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. It's up to you. I mean, we can wait a couple minutes and see if they get it.
I'll give it a couple more minutes,
okay.
and then I'll just start.
Just do it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just...
Okay.
Because it'll just start getting off.
If it's that adapter, somebody will be willing to own their device. Because she's got that adapter.
Yeah.
This person before I can help her.
Usually like the bigger.
Yes.
I might. Does she have it on like a flash drive or something that we could easily? Does she have it on like a flash drive or something we could easily transfer over? Or is it like on that cloud, like Google or?
I don't know.
I could ask.
Oh.
It's just easier to buy a it's on
Does anybody have a device that they would be willing to sacrifice for her to use with a VGA port? It's like this one. Okay. 37. We don't even know if it'll work, but it's worth a try. She just has to log into Google.
Oh yeah, she just kicked me out.
Okay. Thank you. Here, do we want to try this one?
You're the VGA. Here it is. Yay, thank you.
Everything's up there.
Thank you so much.
What's your name?
Allison.
You're Allison, you're a queen.
You could sign me out of that. My Google might be on. See my older brother.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce and yeah, sure.
Good problem solving.
What you got to
What
do?
you gotta do?
I just wish they'd give us the training.
Yeah.
You know, that we don't have to wait.
Yeah.
Did everybody get 2 pieces of paper and a pencil? Come on up and grab 2 pieces.
Come on and grab 2 pieces of paper.
Here you go.
All right, sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties there. Welcome to Hunger Games in the Classroom. Before we begin, please turn your cell phone ringer off. Fire regulations require that all session attendees have a chair. There is no standing in aisles or sitting on the floor. Please do not use chairs for your belongings if others are looking for a place to sit. If you are plugging devices into wall outlets, keep in mind that people may be moving around during the session. Your devices may be damaged if someone runs into the cords. Act 48 will still be available at P&C as we have offered in the past. However, no codes will be distributed this year. You will be able to submit your Act 48 credit online via the evaluation process. You can find the links in the Attendee Service Center on the P&C webpage. And now I present to you Ashley Lano.
First of all, I want to give a big round of applause to Allison. She's a queen. Thank you. One of the joys about dealing with technology is how to fix it. So that's something we can all relate to. But moving on, my name is Ashley Lano. I work at Wing Gap Middle School. I am a 7th grade writing teacher. I have been teaching for over 4 years. And I'm going to talk to you guys about the Hunger Games in the classroom, but more specifically, gaming in the classroom. So, lock the doors, get your weapons, let's do this. All right. All right, you're not going to kill each other yet. There will be an opportunity to later. Through writing. Ooh. All right, so this is not just going to be about having kids pretend to murder each other in the classroom. That would make me look bad. This main focus is about incorporating gaming and kind of differentiated activities in your classroom to help build student engagement and also critical thinking in students. So today, how I'm going to be working this is the first section. I'm going to be talking to you about gaming as a whole and how that can be incorporated into every single classroom. I had a couple questions from staff saying, hey, I teach 4th grade, I teach younger. Is this going to be all right for my group? Well, maybe not the Hunger Games section, unless you have like a really hardcore elementary school, which like go for it. But the idea behind Hunger Games in the classroom, absolutely. I'm also going to then talk to you about how I've incorporated gaming into my own personal English classroom and how you can incorporate some of these ideas into math, science, or different arts classrooms. And in between that, we'll be doing, don't worry, like you don't have to volunteer like a lot. I'm not going to make you like tap dance in front of here. But there will be a little bit of writing. I am a writing teacher. It's just like in me. So you, again, you get to kind of kill each other, get some tension out through writing, just to kind of spice things up. So to first begin, I want to talk about gaming in the classroom as an overview. For a very long time, classrooms were taught through something called passive learning. What passive learning was, the kids sat in rows, the teacher stood in the front, they were the all-knowing expert, and they poured information into the kids' brains. The kids did not say anything, they just maybe raised their hand to ask a question or answer a question occasionally, but there was no real deep thinking involved, and the kids had absolutely no real power over their own learning. It was a lecture, tense, test, rinse, and repeat. So kids would have a lecture, and on Fridays, you get a test, rinse and repeat, and you do it all over again. How many of you have had a class where you had something like this? You had a lecture, maybe a spelling or a grammar test on Friday, and rinse and repeat. How many of you actually remember anything from those lessons? Exactly. What studies have found is these kind of lessons are really good at teaching kids how to memorize, but not really how to learn or how to think critically. So that brings us to more modern or active learning. The goal of more modern or active learning is that students are just more than a pair of ears. They're a brain. And we want them active and engaged in the classroom. I had a professor once tell me, once the students stop being engaged, they stop learning because they don't care. Yes, the good kids will sit there and they'll go through the motions to get the good grade, but the ones who the grades don't necessarily matter as much, that's where you start getting the behavioral issues because they don't care. They feel like it doesn't involve them. So through modern learning, you want to get them engaged, and you also want to start to differentiate two different kinds of learning. Most people do not learn through lecture. How many of you can learn through a lecture? How many of you are those lucky few? See, like some, like, you can raise your hand. I'm not going to throw things at you. It's okay. All right. How many of you are visual? How many of you are tactile? Good. How many of you don't feel like raising your hand? Yeah, all right, I see you. We also want our students to become higher, more critical thinkers. We found through this passive learning that kids aren't thinking, or if they do, it's at a very basic level. They're just spitting back things that they've been taught. They're not actually thinking. And we also, as teachers, want to develop their skills. We want kids to hopefully be able to go out into the real world and succeed, and not just be kind of thoughtless drones. So really great to start incorporating engagement, active learning, critical thinking is through gaming in the classroom. Now the technical definition of gaming in the classroom is it's an instructional method that requires the learner to participate in a competitive activity with preset rules. In blunter terms, you give the kids some rules and they we play a game. Now, what kind of game this is up to you and what's available to your classroom. And I'm going to talk to you guys about that. Every single one of you has a different classroom. Some of you are maybe dealing with 10 kids. Some of you may be dealing with a class of 30. Some of you may be dealing with high honors kids. Some of you may be dealing with IEPs or students with 504s. So what's wonderful about gaming in the classroom, and what I'm going to talk to you more about, is it gives the power to you to start making your own decisions and making lessons that are best for your students. So I have a short video that kind of goes over gaming in the classroom and gives you some ideas. And I want to talk to you then about some pros and cons to gaming in the classroom. Is it going to work? Wait, technology's going to? No? Okay. Is the volume going to work? See, volume's on. That's a good way to start. It's not. There we go. Here we go, here we go. Thank you though, Allison. I see you. Give another round of applause for Allison. She's the real hero today.
Every game ever made is a learning game.
What about Tetris?
Learning game.
Checkers?
Learning.
Monopoly?
Terrible, but yes.
Pull my finger.
No! I mean, yes. I mean, no to the finger, yes to learning.
Even Grand Theft Auto?
Learning.
Whoa. Unless I want to get fired, GTA is not coming into my classroom.
Okay, not all games are school appropriate, but they can still have learning value. You just gotta see them as experiences rather than instruction. Field trips rather than textbooks.
Okay, now how would I make one of these learning games work in a classroom?
First off, start with the games your kids or you are already interested in. Stuff that drives deep engagement and thinking. That's what makes games great.
Seems like students love every game. Doesn't really matter which one.
Did you ever play Oregon Trail in school?
Yeah, it was a blast.
Did you ever play it at home?
Point taken.
For game-based learning, after-school play is the litmus test for engagement.
Okay, but say I found a cool game. It's still challenging to make it fit into my curriculum.
Treat games like experiences, not instruction. Prepare just like you would for a field trip or film screening. Set some context and then explore together.
But what if students go off the beaten path?
Play will be messy, but it'll also bring opportunities for learning.
I like that. But let's get real. What about cost, time, and technology?
Games can introduce many practical challenges. Thankfully, there's tons of games out there. And don't forget about board games. Find what works for you.
Okay, I'm excited, but also a little nervous. You gotta admit, some games can give kids some serious misconceptions.
Use inaccuracies to drive inquiry. As they play, have students keep track of what doesn't seem right. Later, have them explain how the game's point of view compares with reality.
What about this? To explain what they find, students can create YouTube-style Let's Play videos with commentary.
Awesome idea. 3 tips to make any game into a learning experience. Use the games your students and you actually want to play. Treat games as experiences, not instruction. And use inaccuracies to drive students' inquiry.
You left out the best part.
What's that?
Now I'm counting Pokemon as PD.
Looking for more great resources? Head over to Common Sense Education for teaching strategies, EdTech reviews, lesson plans, and more.
Alright, so there are, as they mentioned in the video, a variety of different ways you can include gaming in the classroom. And yes, there may be some disadvantages. It would be wrong of me not to address them. Time. We all wish we had more time. But that may be something you need to adjust in your plan. Space. I have this tiny classroom. How am I supposed to have this big elaborate game? There's also the issue people may say kids make it out of control. They make it loud. Okay, I acknowledge this. Or some just don't even know where to start. But you will find that, yes, the disadvantages are things you need to think about, but the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. And the disadvantages are all things you can plan for, prepare, and make your own. What's really wonderful about gaming in the classroom is it's a versatile learning experience. It puts control back to you in the classroom. Too often now, teachers feel like they don't have control in their own classroom. I'm just a test monitor. I'm just following a script. Through gaming in the classroom, it starts to give that power back to you. You get to make the rules. You get to kind of play the coach, the ref, and you can adjust for what's best for your kids. Because in the end, no one knows better than your kids. So yeah, maybe you don't have a ton of time, but you know, okay, I'll take 2 or 3 classes for this. All right, maybe you have a small classroom. All right, maybe you won't have them like doing sprints, you know, maybe they need it, but instead it can be a more small, contained gaming activity. Also, it is a highly engaging way to get students to learn. And as I mentioned before, when students aren't engaged, they're not learning. Gaming also through studies helps cognitive and effective learning. It helps students become higher thinkers. They're not just sitting there being told what to think. They get to be involved, and they have to use critical thinking skills to try and win the game, to try and beat others, and it forces them to think, to ask questions, to think on the spot. It also gives them cooperative skills. Now, I'm not an elementary school teacher. I teach middle school. But I know from my own coworkers, we often talk about the fact that, oh my God, these kids have no social skills. How many of you have said something along these lines? Oh my God, these kids have no social skills. Oh my God, they don't know how to talk. Well, this gives them the chance to learn how to talk, how to work in a team, how to be competitive, how to be cooperative. It gives, which is a life skill that they need. And as I mentioned before, as teachers, we need them to think, and we need to give them life skills. Also through gaming, you can differentiate. You can add visual aspects, tectonic aspects, all sorts of different elements into one lesson so that every student is capable of learning. There's a quote up here that I really like. It says, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. We're not here to quench kids of their thoughts. We're not there to say, sit down, this is what you need to know, now get out of my sight, also here's a test. We're here to ignite their thoughts. We're there to help them grow and to think beyond what they may already know. Now, to incorporate gaming into my classroom, I, through some practice and work, incorporated a Hunger Games into my classroom. Now, I've had some people mention like, ugh, I don't know if the Hunger Games would go over so great in my personal school. I'm in a situation where my administration approved of the Hunger Games, but I know that may not be the case for everybody. This activity can be involved with any sort of survival-based book, in which there are many. If you are reading Lord of the Flies, this is an activity that can easily be adjusted for Lord of the Flies. If you read Hatchet, this is an activity that can be easily adjusted for that. There are tons and tons of survival books, and you may need to do a little tweaking, but you can make it work best for your school. Now, before I go into how I incorporated the Hunger Games into my classroom, I want to kind of give you guys a taste of what my students deal with. So we're going to have the first annual PETE and C Hunger Games. Applause. So the first part of doing this is creating your own character. I start this unit for my narrative unit in writing class. I go over a lesson of different characterization. Now this was a big reason why I chose the Hunger Games, because the Hunger Games contains characters that have a variety of different characterization tools. This gives kids a chance to start characterizing their own character. And so I'm going to give you guys that chance as well. On one of your pieces of paper, what I would like for you to do is, well, first put your own name, first and last. There may be repeats. Right. Spell legibly. No name, no grade. But once you put your own name, I would like for you to think of a character name. Now, with my students, obviously I tell them it has to be a school-appropriate name, but we're adults here, so if you want to put like Poop McFarter 12, go for it, you're an adult. You're going to give your character a name. Then you're going to choose what district your character is from. District 1 is in charge of money. District 2 is in charge of stonework. District 3 is electronics. 4 is fishing. 5, electricity. 6, transportation. 7, lumber. 8, fashion. 9, grain. You'll be shocked to find that one's not very popular. 10 is animals. 11 is farming, also not super popular. And 12 is mining. That's also where the main character is from. Next, you have to list 1 or 2, no more than 2, your character's not a superhero, strengths that your character has. Maybe they're really strong. Maybe they're really fast. Maybe they're clever. Maybe they're good at persuading people. Maybe they have good survival skills. And you need to also give them 1 weakness. No one is perfect. Even Superman has a weakness. Maybe they're, really strong but really slow. Maybe they're fast but they're not that strong. Maybe it's a more personal weakness. For example, in the story, Katniss's main weakness is her love for her sister. Take a moment and create your character. When you're done, fold up your lovely piece of paper and use your imagination and pretend I have beautiful crystal bowls that I will be collecting these pieces of papers in. However, I don't. I have a teacher's salary. So I will be collecting your paper in these really classy food containers. So create your character, fold up your piece of paper, and then when you're ready, you can hold it up in the air and I'll come around and collect it. Working on your character, start to wrap up.
I think we have a couple of minutes. Thank you. Come on.
Last call, any characters? Thank you. Allison, did you get your character? Oh my god. Alright. So the first step is teaching my students about characterization. And through that, they create a character. Now, like I mentioned before, if you are interested in actually incorporating the Hunger Games and doing something like this in your classroom, you can create your character. Now, it does not have to be Hunger Games based. Say if you're teaching Lord of the Flies, which is a very popular high school book, they still can do this activity. You just adjust it a little bit for your students' need. Also, I also have people wondering, well, what if my kids don't know the story of the Hunger Games? That is absolutely fine. You do not need to fully know the Hunger Games story in order to participate in these activities. You are learning about characterization and you're creating a character. That's all you need. Everything else can be taught along the way. Now, why did I even choose the Hunger Games in the first place? As I mentioned, I'm a writing teacher. If you're a reading and writing teacher, the Hunger Games contains narrative elements that are very important for teaching. It contains mood, theme, lots of theme. It contains strong characterization. It contains the 3 main forms of conflict. So there's a ton of narrative elements in there that you can work with. It's an engaging story. There's, blood, death, gore, romance. What more can kids want? So it makes them excited and they want to learn. Also, you can start to incorporate activities that don't just involve narrative writing, but also argumentative, which is like persuasive, and informational writing. So one of the activities I do, now I'm not going to make you guys do this now, unless you want to, is I will have to argue to the sponsors why they should survive. Does anyone want to be bold? No? No? Okay. Also, they may have to do research on different plants or animals to help them survive different injuries that they may be dealing with throughout the game. Also, this provides the chance for different STEM activities. So, for example, through popsicle sticks, I will have students build their own bow and arrow, and we can have an archery competition. Now, of course, I have to warn them not to fling pencils around the classroom or every one of my coworkers would hate me. But it is a great opportunity to help students who learn in a bunch of different ways learn how to write argumentatively, informationally, and through narrative. Now, how do I start this process? I first introduce them to the idea of plot structure, and then I teach them characterization, and we do the little character creation that we just did together. I also then teach them conflict. As I mentioned before, one of the lovely things about the Hunger Games is that it contains the it contains all the main points of conflict. Character versus self, character versus other, character versus environment, and character versus government or society. It covers them all. So, I give the chance for my students to not only learn about the different forms of conflict, but to create their own. So, I'm going to give you the same opportunity. You are now going to create your own elimination scene. Now, how bloody and gory you want to make this is up to you. Again, we're all adults here. My battery's running low. Thought you should all know. So, here is some examples of what you can do. This is going to be through first-person point of view. So this is your character taking someone out. So this is your chance to get some rage out, guys. I know it's all in there. We're adults, we're teachers and educators. There's a lot of pent-up rage. All right. I crept through the grass, and I saw them run by. I readied my bow and arrow. I strung back and let the arrow fly. They fell to the ground before they even knew what happened. Now, again, I understand in some schools this would not be appropriate. So, what some schools can have the option is a disappearing scene or an elimination scene. So you can adjust the rules to what's appropriate for your school district. Now, in my school district, I have gotten the okay to have these sorts of scenes. But again, this is a very versatile learning experience, so you can adjust it for what's best for your students. But here we're all adults, so if you're sweet, you can make it kind of light. If you're violent, go for it. You can rip some heads off. So take a moment, a couple sentences, write down your elimination scene. And then, same thing as before, I will come around and collect your pieces of paper, and then we will have a Hunger Games.
Here we go.
Allison, what can I do about this? No, you never fail. with some technical issues. So what I want everyone to do, pause your death scenes. I want you to close your eyes and imagine the most beautiful slide you've ever seen. And I want you to pretend that's what's in front of you right now. I know, I worked hard on it. Once you're done, fold up your faces. Can you make them into little smaller squares for me? There's a lot of you in here. So you can fold it up into an adorable little square. And again, I will come around and collect your death scenes. You're still working. Some of you are writing death novels. My God, that's some anger in you. Start writing. And last call, any other death scenes? Going once? Right? I can't read that. You're my girl today.
Thank you. Did the cord come loose? Is that what happened?
It's just
Not working. Not happening.
No, we're not in my favor. It's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, there are many different ways that you can incorporate gaming into your classroom. And if you want to incorporate the Hunger Games, there's different activities that you can use. You can have, like I mentioned, argumentative activities. You can do research papers. You can have kids do full obstacle courses, which are things I have done. Sometimes, though, your classroom is small, it's contained, and you don't have a lot of space. But right now, I just got you to create a full character and a full conflict scene. And through the pure show of luck, we can have our own Hunger Games. So, as a little example, some of you are no longer going to be with us. Now, I'm going to shake the salad of death around. Now, for my classroom, I would have like a big presentation where I have the kids' names, but I can barely get the sound to work, so we're going to stick with the paper. Our first step today is Jade McDonald. Jade McDonald, stand up. Jade, is she dead? Oh. Jade, you were killed by someone with really nice handwriting. Quietly, I approached the blue gator. She was startled when I grabbed both of her hands and forced her to speak in front of a crowd. That is a famous I knew her weakness was social anxiety, and she couldn't handle the pressure. She immediately cracked under the pressure and died. Whoever wrote this, can you let her face her killer? Girl, stand up. You killed someone. At least let her face
I thought
her.
we were supposed to call someone in particular.
Oh, well, no, it worked out beautifully. Death from social anxiety is a rough way to go. Our next victim, now I'm not going to do everyone, but a couple of you will fall, is Mr. E. Mr. E, will you please stand up? Mr. E. It's not Mr. E. You were killed by another person with beautiful handwriting. The darkness crept in, sucking the last bits of strength. I had to hold on. High up on a tree, I was safe, but every breath was something I can't read. I began to shake the branches, and oh no, I could not shake the branches, or God forbid fall. That would be the end of me. Then finally, I saw the shadows of them approaching. I dropped from the branches, and they were dead before they knew what happened. Oh, death by tree jump. I'm so sorry. Whoever wrote this with the beautiful handwriting, can you stand and be proud? With beautiful handwriting. I just can't read. I'm a millennial. I can't read cursive that well. We shall have one more sacrifice before I move on. That person's safe. I don't know where they went. Hartwell Hammerman. Hartwell, Mr. Hammerman. Oh, it's right. You have been killed by someone whose handwriting I can read more easily. I saw my competition in the distance and knew I had to take her out. She and I could not exist in this world together. With 2 quick steps and a slash across the throat. Ooh, who's this person? She existed no longer. I remained victorious. Who's this bloodthirsty person? Come in and embrace your... Oh, girl! All right, so don't worry, we will mourn you at the end. And more of you will die, but we're going to take a pause for a minute. I know you're bloodthirsty, though, so it's hard to contain the rage. Again, imagine that beautiful slide. God, boy, did I work hard on that. It's nice, right? Thank you. I worked hard. So, that is how I have incorporated the Hunger Games into the English classroom. I focus more on the narrative elements, the ideas of characterization, plot structure, and conflict, and have used that to help students learn different narrative elements, along with incorporating some of the argumentative and informational research we've done in the past year. However, I know not all of you are English teachers. How many of you are not English teachers? Are any of you math teachers? You're so smart. Any of you science? Social studies? I see a librarian. What's up, girl? So, there are ways to incorporate gaming into your classroom that is not always English-based. In fact, it's highly recommended that you start to incorporate team training into your classroom. With team training, or there's a lot of activity happening up here. What team teaching is when you all work together and you focus all on the same topic. So, instead of one teacher teaching over here, one teaching over there, and it's all a bunch of different topics that aren't connecting to the kids, by working together or gaming together, this helps students connect ideas, it helps them form higher inquiry, it helps them think more deeply, and it helps them remember. How many of you have ever felt when the kids leave my classroom, they forget everything I've taught them immediately? Show of hands. Yeah. Why can't I get them to remember anything I've taught them? Well, through team teaching, it forces them to remember what you taught them, because it's not just one teacher telling them something, it's 5 or more. So, if you are a math teacher, rates and ratio are a great activity to use with the Hunger Games. If you're a science teacher, you can teach survival skills, which can help with chemistry. What chemicals go into making a fire? If you are a home ec teacher, what food can you make? If you were forced in a forest and you had to survive, that helps the kids not only feel like they're more part of something bigger, it helps them feel more cooperative, it helps things stick in their minds. Now, I don't like numbers. I always think kids are more than just figures. But if you are someone, if you're one of like my math people and you do need some statistics, I have found since once I started this, I have my students take a writing benchmark at the beginning of the year. By the end, their scores have gone up 2 to even more points, over 67% of my students. When I did, the PSSAs used to have writing benchmarks that were narrative-based. And I found since once I began this, we only had that year, 3 kids below basic and over 40% growth. So, I know it's not about numbers, but it does help. When kids are sitting there being passive, they're not learning. But when they are engaged and they feel like they are in control of their own learning, then they have the opportunity to truly grow. And this also, as I mentioned before, gives the power back to you. You get to plan what's best for your students. You get to plan how they will best learn. You know your environment more than anybody else. You're not just a test monitor. So, maybe the Hunger Games won't work perfectly for your classroom, but you can adapt some of these ideas and use them in your classroom through different gaming strategies and get the power back into your classroom. However, now the power is with me. I'm going to kill more of you off. The grand finale. Our last 3 to go as we start to wrap up. One of our final ones is Carson. Carson, stand up. Carson, I'm sorry. Carson, you were killed by someone whose handwriting I can read, thankfully. As I sat high up in the maple tree, I heard a group coming my way. I planned my escape through the trees connected to mine. When the time was right, I pinned them onto the oh man, excuse me, I pulled the pin of the grenade and threw it into the center of the group coming my way. I then retreated across the branches of the trees for safety. Boom. Oh man, you got grenaded, man. What a way to go. Who grenaded everyone? Oh, there it is. Thank you. Our next victim is these are death scenes. Here we go. Granger, will you please step up? Stand up. Granger. Oh, there you go, girl. Yeah. All right, Granger, I'm sorry. You have been killed. I stood frozen, and watched as the two fought near the cliff's edge, the younger hurling their weight against the other. Before I could intervene to save my friend, the other person lost their balance and fell. My friend and I pulled our weapon, but we watched them as they helplessly toppled over the edge. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, so dead. All right. And then our final victim for today is Samuel. Will Samuel please stand up? Oh, so sorry you did. You were killed by someone who also really likes cursive. Guys, I'm a millennial. This is rough. Right? Stop it. Speak LOL. God. I hunched on my tree branch, waiting for a group to pass. You guys really like creeping in trees. You're like there too. Slowly, they marched forward. I held my breath and counted. 1, 2, 3, and watched the massive beehive crash onto their head. Oh, well, let's all, I need more room, more elbow room. Let's all give a round of applause. If you have fallen today, please stand up. Let's give them a round of applause. I apologize for some of the technical issues. That is some of the magic of technology, is learning how to work around it. But I really hope you get some ideas or at least some encouragement to use gaming in your classroom. You're free to keep your mechanical pencils. I hope you got a color you enjoy. And thank you all very much for coming out today. Thank you.
I saw you walk in back there. The first session that I went to, so I really liked that. Get out of it. And then I was oh, okay, good. And someone said,
Allison,
I'd say that 80% of it, if you just get a couple of things to me in each session, then it's worth it. Yeah, actually, really, and then I struggled with her today. The one that I wanted to go to later this afternoon was yeah. Oh, okay. Right. She might post it afterwards, but yeah, I would do that. Are you going to head home early? Yeah, I think that's because thank you. Yeah. I want to definitely get home before. I know. We want everybody to get home safe. I am not the most confident driver. No, that's a dangerous road. So do what you have to do. We were thinking we would take a longer route so I can stay on major highways for longer. Because everybody's in there. Well, pretty much everybody's in there.